Talk. A recent World Bank showed that 9 in 10 Filipino students aged 10 struggle to read a simple text. On Monday, January 30, Vice President and Education Secretary Sara Duterte delivered her basic education reports laying out the challenges and learning reforms. So today, we are joined by Philippine Business for Education Executive Director Justin Raagas and Aral Pilipinas Lead Convener Reg Sibal. Hi ladies, welcome to the program.
Magandang hapon.
Yes, magandang hapon. Thank you for having us.
So let's start the discussion na, no? So yun nga, nung Monday, nag-report si Vice President Sara Duterte ng kanyang basic education report. So as start of dito sa discussion natin, what do you think of Vice President Duterte's report? Of course, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., the keynote speaker of the event, ito yung masyadong glaring na sinabi niya dito, we have failed our children. So, sino? Siguro, let's start with
Yes.
Justin.
I think to start with, most of the things in the report are things that we already know or have experienced or have seen, no? But what's good is that there is actually that acknowledgement na this is where we are. These are our learning outcomes. This is the state of our education system. So, given that, and even though the glaring line nga na we have failed is an acknowledgement that we need to do a lot, we need to do better, and I guess that contextualizes the whole matatag roadmap. So I think it's good na you have the state, but then after the state of education, then what? And then the plans are outlined.
Okay. For you, Miss Reg.
Ako, if there's something I really appreciated, kasi I was physically there during that event, was the Vice President and the Deputy Secretary acknowledge the issues in education, which in the past, there were some persons or officials who kind of say na it does not exist. There was even a conference before that I attended na sabi nung official is, no, students hindi aabot ng grade 6 nang hindi nakabasa. Here, the secretary acknowledged that there are issues in terms of the teachers' loads, that there is a problem with the number of infrastructure. She even acknowledged even the very low ranking we have in the global setting of education. She also acknowledged the disparities in education. So there were a lot of things that she mentioned that usually you will hear about it in education, but that will not come from the highest person in the Department of Education. So if there's something that I really admired when I was listening in, was that. And to me, by acknowledging it, kasi balik tayo you cannot look for solutions if you do not acknowledge that there is a problem. So with that, she laid the groundwork na this is also the foundation. Bakit ko nilatag ang aking matatag na plataforma para sa edukasyon? So it was, in a way, addressing all the issues, if not most or even more, than the issues na nilatag niya, nakapaghain siya in the way, although territorial order to in a 6-year term, a lot of people were saying na very tall order yung kanyang nilatag. Pero maganda na nagsimula tayo na in-acknowledge ang problema. And to be told, no, i-share ko din essentially, yung mga nababasa ko, kasi binabasa ko yung mga teacher groups nakakatuwa na merong mga nagsasabi, naiiyak po ako na si Secretary ay, narandam ko po yung sinabi niya. So this is like, kasi sometimes teachers would say, hindi yan yung estado Pero ito nakita mo even from the ground that they appreciate that their efforts, yung mga nararanasan nila, ay kind of napakinggan. And remember, she was kind of criticized when she was appointed because she was not from the education sector.
Yeah.
Because the former people who were there were from education, but this is a person not from education who was using the lens of somebody also from the outside and somebody from within.
Yeah, of course. Siguro nga, nare-recall niyo na parang Duterte started her speech with bilang isang ina.
Yes.
So I think it resonated with the audience as well, the mothers and the teachers who are also mothers, di ba? So doon nag-start siya. Pero aside from that, of course, hindi naman perfect yung speech.
Yes.
So, what struck you the most?
Okay, I think what struck me the most was the fact that, it actually coincides with our education reform agenda in PBED. So, in PBED kasi, we have always called for the need to improve education kasi we were in the midst of the learning crisis. So, like Reg said, we have been very vocal, kami yung medyo maingay about issues when nobody was talking about it or there was that lack of acknowledgement from the inside. But then, we were happy na, tama naman pala, there is data, and actually the office also agrees with it. But what I think struck me was that given our reform areas, so given the learning crisis, now we have 6 reform areas that we think are very important in terms of where we want to take education. So sabi, given our consultations on ground with education experts, nakita namin na importante talaga ang education governance, making sure that we involve all players and sectors. Importante ang teacher quality, importante ang nutrition and well-being of students. Also important ang lifelong learning, making sure that curriculum ay angkop sa kailangan matutunan ng mga bata to make sure that they're able to progress and they're able to become empowered and good citizens in the future, 'di ba? Prosperous citizens. Also, importante din ang education spending. We need to look at how we're using our resources para we're able to support learning for all our youngsters. And given that, so these are our reform areas. Ito yung gusto naming tutukan with the projects that we're doing, with the reforms that we're pushing, and in the line of EDCOM. And nakita namin na connected din talaga siya sa naka-outline ni VP Sara. So the matatag agenda only has 4 things, right? But under those 4 things, sabi ni Reg nga, tall order, kasi ang daming bullets. So when we map those together, sabi namin, we're very happy that they see the problems and they see the possible solutions. I guess what we think should be done in the next few months is, given the tall order, in terms of where they want to go, what are the numbers they want to achieve? Okay. What are the indicators? Kasi at the end of the day, tayo as citizens, we will look at them as to whether they were able to achieve that, to achieve their goals, right?
Sa akin naman maganda kasi kumpara natin, as much as we don't want to compare, kadalasan pag nagkakaroon ng report, ina-highlight ang achievements.
Okay.
This is the time that I saw that they were not so much keen on pagbuhat ng bangko, kundi pag-recognize kung saan talaga tayo nagsisimula. And I agree with kasi yun din yung comment namin. The tall order did not quantify, it did quantify the problems, but it did not give data on what are the targets. Okay. Kumbaga, pag nag-grado ka, dapat alam mo kung ano yung ma-achieve mo at ano yung hahabulin mo pagdating ng 6 na taon o bawat taon that you will have. But but also added, this is because these things are things that we also resonate with different levels. Hindi lang siya sa administrasyon ng education, pati doon sa learner, pati sa teacher na sinabing gusto i-deload, sa mga estudyante na sinabing susuportahan namin kayo. So it kind of resonated on different levels. Sabi mo nga, nagsimula siya sa kanyang bilang magulang, no? Kung meron tayo dati yung predecessor niya, si Lola Liling, ito si Nanay Sara. Ang isa din siguro, medyo mababaw, pero isa dun sa mga tumatak din sa akin, nung araw na nandun ako, yung pinatayo niya yung mga opisyal na magiging katuwang dun sa pagbuo nito. At sinabi niya, wag muna natin silang palakpakan dahil wala pa silang nagagawa. Yeah. So that kind of had also a strong impact on me because beyond the targets was also identifying accountability and making sure that, hey, ito yung mga taong sisingilin nyo at wag nyo muna silang pagdad dahil wala pa silang natutunan. But overall, of course, also with PIBEDS, we also saw that it was also aligned with what we were. And it was so much appreciated by the partners, the organizations who were there because they saw that, wait, this is the target. Dito tayo, saan pa tayo pwedeng makatulong? At tugma ba ito sa ating ina-advocate? Like sa amin din sa ARAL, Pilipinas, ina-advocate yung learning continuity for all, especially for the marginalized and all those who are affected by conflict in this. And we saw that hanapin mo as an organization, nakatugma ba? At nakita namin na mayroong mga provision para doon. So it kind of also encouraged yung mga nandoon na partners to also support this one because it was also a support and to identify which persons are accountable. And I think in so many ways, iba-iba yung tumatak eh. Sabi ko nga kanina, pag binasa mo yung mga teacher group, ang sabihin nila, tumatak sa akin, naramdaman ko. So parang there was something in that report that had something for, basically para sa bawat isa, na merong, maaring hindi yun sa amin, nag-resonate. Pero sa ibang sektor, meron siyang natamaan niya yung mga sektor. Even the health sector, there was something there. So I think it was a thought of speech. It was a well thought of tall-ordered plan. Yeah. Of course, agree that there should have been targets in terms of numbers that should be that make us more, that. But all in all, parang ako, sabi nga na, first time na, hindi nagbuhat ng bangko,
Yeah.
kundi nagsabi, naglatag kung nasaan talaga tayo.
So tama yun. Kasi 'di ba for the past 6 years nga, yun nga naglabas yung World Bank ng report nila. Pinabalik pa, if ma-recall nyo, ng former secretary din na bakit may ganitong report. So ayun nga, clearly ngayon may admission na there's a problem talaga. So may ganito. And of course, the Vice President focused on 3 major things based on dun sa speech niya. Una, lack of facilities and resources. So this is pounding the Philippine basic education. Another is congested K-12 curriculum that of course needs review. And then the other one is the teacher's welfare. So ito yung tatlo na nakita namin na parang overarching themes talaga nung kanyang naging speech. So let's get to it one by one. So una, on the lack of school facilities or resources, do you agree with her that it is the most pressing issue pounding the education? Why or why not?
So I think it is one of the pressing issues, but not the most.
Yes.
Everything is pressing. Teacher quality, curriculum, infrastructure, even the welfare of students, like students coming in malnourished. These are all pressing issues that have to be addressed in parallel. But to that point, kailangan silang, and I think what's good is that there are multiple strands taking care of all of these. And to your point earlier, Reg, diba, yung pinatayo niya yung mga officials, there are really like USECs heading each of the departments. So okay yan, because that's also her role to delegate and make sure that everything is addressed. But kailangan talaga ng ample classrooms. Kailangan ng classrooms that are conducive for learning. Before, during the pandemic, we were also calling for, we have always been noisy about calling for going back to the classrooms face-to-face. Kasi this is where learning can really happen, where teachers are present. But if you don't have a good classroom that's conducive, or if you have a classroom with 60 learners, diba, problema talaga siya. So,
Right.
short answer to your question, it is important, but there are other important things.
Yes.
So for you, Reg, siguro what
same.
needs to be done?
That's same. It's the same. Like, because infrastructure is an investment, siguro baka, kung sinabi niya na the most pressing physical investment. Kasi remember,
Physical aspect.
yes, because I agree that it's one of the more pressing and there are other things, especially human resource tayo mas pero agree that it also is one of the foundations that needs to be solved. Kasi a lot of our learners really need to have that particular space. And of course, teachers also echo that na parang hindi sapat. I mean, probably may budget, tama, in the past years, pero hindi nga na-utilize yung pagpapatayo. Pero to them to acknowledge that it is a pressing issue. And also, that's like what she said na, she has already put structures in place, even in her leadership, kasi naglagay siya ng isang undersecretary na directly in charge. Because if you look at how she also did her realigning of tasks among her undersecretaries and offices, it kind of also is aligned with her direction. Kasi parang pag binangga mo nandun meron siyang specific na tao na nakatalaga for infrastructure and also the acquisition of these materials. So I think that that's also important, but agree that we should also try to look into how it aligns. Let's not isolate, though let us not isolate this problem with the other pressing problems in education.
Yeah, so tama. So itong another theme na nabanggit niya is yung K-12. Of course, yung public talaga dito is yung clamor against like dito sa program na to. I mean, maganda naman yung intention, of course, to add like, kasi tayo na lang yun, di ba, naiiwan in terms of basic education, but then the implementation is somehow failing 10 years since implementation. So the Vice President, of course, said that the DepEd would revise the K-12 program to make graduates competitive and, I quote, job ready. For you, what's the first thing that her administration do to address this?
So, well, they are already doing it, right? Which is the review. All in, as supporters of the K-12 system, having pushed for it in the past, when it was first being, drafted, we do think that yes, it is very important. And because of implementation issues or lack of data as to how responsive it is, the solution is not to scrap it, right?
Yeah.
But really to really review. And gaya nung mga datos na prinesenta on other things, that's how we should start with the K-12 curriculum. Although there are already there are already indicators or there are already some information as to where the K-12 curriculum lacks. And yun nga sa shinare ni VP Sara, it's very congested. It doesn't for higher grades, for example, for senior high school, there is that lack of meeting the competencies required to make them employable. So, yun, review yung kailangan, one. But second, I think, is that making sure that in reviewing, they make it available or they open it to public discourse also.
Yeah.
So, sinabi niya naman din yun, na they want to make the curriculum transparent. They want to involve other sectors, so civil society, private sector. Ang dami nating experts sa Pilipinas, di ba? There you have curriculum experts, you have experts in data, you have experts in people analyzing numbers. Why don't you include them? So I think that's one. Second, involve private sector. Kasi one of the key pathways of K-12 is making sure that they're employable, di ba? For outcomes yun. Pupunta sila ng college, magti-TVET, mag-entrepreneur, o to take a TVET strand and then become employed. So how do you make sure that TVET strand, which teaches them skills, technical skills, allows them to work? Syempre, you involve private sector in creating the curriculum, making work immersion stronger. So, review, but then include as many people, as many sectors in that review, and then implement it na agad.
Actually, maganda yung sinabi mo on public discourse.
Yes.
Kasi di ba, I think some of the students we spoke to said that pag pumupunta sila sa isang kumpanya, laging sinasabi daw ng requirement ng company is, priority pa rin namin, college graduate.
Yeah.
So parang yung mga bata, akala ko ba yung promise ng K-12 is to make us employable after grade 12? Diba?
Yes.
So, Miss Reg.
Ako, again, we share the same sentiment. Kapag sinabi na isa sa first step na ginawa, or rather, one of the first steps that the administration did was actually to look into the evaluation of the curriculum and the program itself. Na nakita na ina-identify na they said the mother tongue, even the mother tongue implementation, the curriculum and how it is being rolled out. Napakaganda at very timely kasi remember, bilang guro alam natin na dapat ang curriculum ay dumadaan sa cycle ng ina-evaluate if it really works and then review. So, nagandang nagsimula sa ganun. And also, agree with that there should really be a need to involve as many sectors as possible. There were critics before when K-12 was developed that the persons who developed it were specialists in certain subject areas, forgetting that there should be a high regard for the education side and the public side, especially of those who will roll the curriculum out. Diba? So, napakahalaga din na tingnan yun. Na for example, di ba, may mga nagsasabi na ito ay parang paano namin ito gagamitin or di ba parang how, and also the teachers who will implement it na parang paano yung impact nito sa kanila. Kasi remember, iba-iba din ang sitwasyon ng guro. Di ba, may guro, grade 1 to 6, nagtuturo siya
Yeah.
Di ba, may teacher ka na lahat ng subject area sa isang tuturo. So, di ba, parang yung also the reality that we have, even with the resources, should also be aligned. And I think that's also good because she wants to link it with the teacher's responsibilities and load. Bukod, di ba, kaya sabi niya, to also look at ways how they can deload the teachers, and she's looking at how to hire additional persons to, na sinabi din niya na nagsimula na sila na mag-look into openings for other, take on the admin roles. And also, dun sa evaluation side, I think it has always been a clamor of the private sector also to include them in the evaluation. Kasi hindi pwedeng laging internal ang evaluation.
Okay.
May sense of bias yan And also to involve, yun nga, the public, and making sure that the agreements were met. Because if you recall, yung na-mention niya na, nung nagsimula tayo sa K-12, kasama sa objectives yan ng senior high, na employable. Pero, possibly, merong, baka ang butas nga nun is paano natin na-ensure, although there are concessions naman in terms of tax rates and all, pero in terms of a company, what will make them feel that these people are sufficiently trained and what is the opportunities for these senior high school graduates to progress in their career. Baka, kasi kumbaga, mas mabilis mag-progress yung ano mo. So, yung parang ma-hire ka, pero yung long-term effect nun sa'yo in your progress is also something that needs to be looked at. So, maganda kasing sabi nga natin, hindi mo kayang i-isolate yung mga bagay-bagay na hindi ito ina-attendan. Even when she mentioned that they're trying to address the dropout rates, how do you address that if you do not look at the basic needs of the individual? And that's what I also appreciated in what she said, na hindi kaya ng DepEd as a government agency alone ito, na kailangan niyang mag-coordinate not just with the private, but also government offices, because kailangan mo i-provide yung need ng isang mag-aaral din para masigurong hindi siya nagda-drop out, tuloy-tuloy siya, at mas ma-absorb niya yung natututunan niya sa paaralan. So I think there are so many things that needs to be done, but I think at least for now, what we want to wait is for this to may follow through. At siguro dahil nasabi na nga niya, andyan yung PEBED, yung Aral Philippines, at ibang mga organisasyon nakabantay dun sa commitment ng ating administration, ng kanyang administration at ng kanyang leaders. Kung mapupunan itong mga pangangailangan na in-identify at itong targets na sinabi nila ay matataon. Yun nga lang, sa ngayon kasi missing pa yung numbers eh. Like, di ba, meron ba tayo aspiration na 5 posts up ang ating maiangket sa ranking, o meron bang posisyon na mabawasan ng by how many percent ang ating dropout rate ng ating mga mag-aaral?
Or yung teaching load,
Oo, yung teaching load. Ako hinanap ko, ilang oras yung ibabawas, kasi as teachers are really, so ilang oras ba ang ibabawas nila sa teaching load? O gagawin ba nila ng equivalency ang admin role versus teaching load? Or hindi kasi lahat yan pera eh. Iba sabi, overload pay. Pero hindi eh, well-being pa rin ng guro. So, ano yung specific measures? Although, for now, let's give her that kasi it's a good, we'll just starting point ito. And we know that since na-publicly announced niya to, everybody's going to watch now what's gonna happen next.
Okay, since we've been talking about the welfare na ng teachers kasi you mentioned about yun nga, overloading, administrative tasks. Let's go now sa welfare ng teachers kasi I think this was the highlight.
Yes.
Kasi she spent most of her speech towards the end praising, of course, the teachers, honoring them, and even President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has been saying that without the teachers, di ba, sila yung sinasabi nila, lifeblood ng Department of Education. So, to be honest, she said a lot. Di ba? A lot of like plans para sa mga teachers natin. So, what do you make out of this? Sa tingin nyo, ano yung, ano yung statement na to? Ibig sabihin itong statement niya to na pinaprioritize niya ngayon yung teachers. Ano sa tingin nyo yung lacking dito? At the same time, are her plans really doable given that ang dami? Actually,
yes,
binulat ko siya. More than 10.
Tama naman. Kasi tandaan natin na even nung siya ay nangangampanya bilang vice-presidente, kasama ito sa kanyang plataforma na talagang tingnan kung ano yung estado ng mga teachers at madeload din sila. So I think, kaya nga sabi ko, although yun nga, yung isang critic din minsan doon sa speech niya, she highlighted so much on the teacher na yung iba hinanap yung highlight naman daw dun sa learner. Although hindi naman niya pero parang mas na-highlight, which kind of also to some extent makes sense because these are the ones who are, she's directly responsible for in delivering the education. Because again, kumbaga sa employer, PBED would know this so much na, especially in business, you are only as good as your particular employees who deliver your goods. And that's why she wanted to make sure that the teachers, kahit papano, the needs would be met, their well-being will be addressed, yung mga hinaing nito so that they can deliver. Kasi, kunyari, we can do a complete curriculum review. Pero paano mo siya i-roll out? Hindi naman babaguhin ng teacher kasi hassle sa kanya. Or for example, how can the teacher help address the needs of the students, the psychosocial needs of the students, mental health and things, if they themselves hindi nila kayang ibigay yung kumbaga sila lacking noon. So I think she's always been consistent even from her campaign to focus on the welfare of teachers, and I think she acknowledges that the teacher agency and the teachers are actually very important in delivering both as the long-term investment for the learner and also in the economic side because they are the ones, sila yung means to an end niya. Yeah, so it's very important for her to acknowledge them. And of course, remember that DepEd is the biggest employer of the Philippines, and it's the biggest it's a very powerful tool for education. It's a very, very powerful tool for empowering the nation and providing possible economic long-term rewards for the nation. Kaya napaka-importanting tutukan. Pero yun din, hindi man sana, pero I know naman, probably, she's also trying to focus on the learner at the end all, and using the teacher as a means to that. But she also acknowledges na ito yung agency ko, meron din naman kasing ibang ahensya na maaring tumugon sa pangangailangan ng learners. So we'll use that as a baseline. Na binanggit din niya na kailangan hindi dapat lahat din sa DepEd na expect dahil may ibang ahensya din. So dito siya tututok. So which is also a strategic way of putting things.
So on teachers, yes, teachers are in the classroom the most important inputs to learning. As Reg mentioned nga earlier, you can review the curriculum, you can make good classrooms, you can give everybody computers, but if you don't have a good facilitator for learning, yung learning outcomes talaga ay hindi aangat. Alternately, a bad teacher can also result to bad learning outcomes. All the more that we need good teachers inside the classroom these days because of the state of education that we're in. 91% learning poverty. You have kids coming into the school, in the classroom, with different levels of learning. So, kunyari, grade 5 siya, pero yung level ng cognitive ability niya or yung learning ability niya, grade 2 lang. So, you really need a teacher who has the capacity to assess them at grade level and then make sure that how they're being taught is also nuanced towards their learning capacity to bring them up to grade level. So that's one. But I think what's important to also acknowledge is that we have so many issues in terms of teacher welfare and teacher quality. So a study done by the World Bank in terms of teacher competencies really showed that we do have a problem in terms of subject matter expertise.
Yes.
And I guess it's given now we're already laying out the ground, the data and the state, I think it's important to say that na kailangan din natin iangat yung quality of teachers who are already teaching. And this is not to blame them because yes, tama naman, they are the lifeblood. They've been working so hard. They are in charge of 28 million learners, right? So it also boils down to how they were prepared for at the start. So how they were trained, what they were trained for, and it is really a whole of system. I think it really talks about a mismatch, whole of system mismatch. So kung tingnan natin, DepEd being the biggest employer of teachers, they have specific needs, right? Ito yung kailangan namin sa teachers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now na nag-pandemic and mas kailangan ng digital skills and other competencies, mas dagdag na to. But yung tanong natin ngayon, yung curriculum ba, to teach those who want to become teachers nung nasa college pa sila, is it also now responsive? Is it also now responding? So, kailangan nila talagang mag-usap. VP Sara also mentioned the Teacher Education Council, if you remember. So the TEC really looks at how we can prepare teachers. So it's really a whole of ecosystem look na hindi lang basta in-service, kailangan din nating tingnan yung pre-service. So sana, the TEC was passed into law last year. Wala pang IRR, but sinabi niya she wants to make sure that it is up and running. We hope it will be up and running this year kasi it will really compel DepEd, CHED, PRC to talk, and hopefully we can supply the DepEd with high quality teachers. So on the side naman of in-service, she mentioned the need for better professional development. Agree kami dyan. But I think the stories on ground in the past is that, and I guess not just in teacher education, but for many of us with licensable professions.
Yes.
Diba minsan, you go to this training to make sure that your license gets renewed. But sometimes it's a training where you sit in a room with 1,000 other people.
Yes.
I think we should stop that practice. I think we need to make sure that if we are to do professional development for teachers, it also has to be nuanced. It also has to be directly addressed towards the skills gap that they have. So, balik na naman tayo dito sa assessment.
Yeah.
Saan ba yung kulang? And then, turuan natin sila or tulungan natin sila to reach that capacity. In terms naman, so ang dami talaga, which it is really a long list. No? I was reading also earlier. We're also talking about welfare in terms of their load.
Yes.
Yun din, because there is so much to catch up on the learning crisis. There is so much. We need to bring our children back to the learning levels where they're supposed to be. We need teachers to focus on teaching them the foundations. Numeracy, literacy, kailangan tututok dyan. In fact, kung even better if there are other teacher assistants who can not just help with the admin side, but even help, if there's a student na kailangan talaga tutukan, spend more time with that student. I guess it's that on so given the point no na ang daming sinabi about teacher welfare, kailangan din talaga kasi ang daming challenges. We do hope that all these happen. And I guess because these are all outlined, this allows us, the private sector, multiple groups to really come in and provide our technical assistance, for example. For example, a group wants to focus on teacher welfare, mental health. So alam na natin na ito yung priority ng government, ito yung office na tututok nito. So at least alam nila kung sino yung kakausapin nila. For us naman, and as you know, recently we launched our report on the teacher licensure exam. So that's something that we're really passionate about uplifting pre-service education. So alam din namin na priority ito ni VP Sara. There is an office that's in charge of this. So we can come in and offer and provide, help, resources whenever they need it.
Okay.
I don't know, let's add to that na minention nga niya yung professionalization. It's a challenge because sometimes yung na-mention niya na professionalization and promotion comes at a cost. Because you could not rise up to the ranks in terms of being teacher with a lot of factors in place. And one of these things, minention din niya, yung parang the one that that's not youth are connections na get into certain positions. And it has been also parang first time ko din na in-acknowledge that those things are happening. So at least it's a good thing that those things are being brought up to the table right now. And the important thing is also when we talk about the teacher well-being, yun nga, nagsimula na naman sa salary na medyo tumaas na. And then we know that there are still a lot of unfilled teacher positions. Maybe that's also a way that they can also address that. And it's also good that she mentioned attached to the teacher is also the other professionals who are attached, right? Like na-mention niya yung lobbying for higher salary for guidance counselors, because DepEd cannot hire guidance counselors with the salary that they're offering, which is still tantamount to a bachelor's degree graduate, whereas a guidance counselor now entails a master's degree graduate. So there are other things na, not with the teacher development that she cited, but she also cited things that are attached to that so that they can perhaps hire more people, so that they can be also competitive enough to provide the salary and hindi na nakatakot mag-apply sa DepEd with the things that it is. Pero side ko lang kasi I've also gone to the field in the past few months. Merong mga nagsasabi na, may mga teachers naman yun especially in the remote areas, because of their small number, yung teacher nila ang overworked because konti yung estudyante, so konti yung allocation ng teacher. So, parang maganda din na tingnan na although we are looking at the wider strokes, let's also look at the ones that, not to forget the marginalized, not just the students, but the marginalized teachers who are also in the remote areas, who are in the disaster areas, the IP communities, which might also have to be given focus on.
Okay, so like it's really a great discussion. Masyadong humaba yung discussion natin on the teachers' welfare. Siguro to wrap up our discussion na, what is this one thing that you think should be given attention to when it comes to the education that you think being neglected?
Isa lang?
Yeah, isa lang.
Pwede bang 5 seconds to think about it?
Okay, sige.
I know, I already have that top of mind. I think what was missing in the whole Matatag report or framework. So while she did talk about well-being of students, right, taking care of their mental health, making sure there is a safe environment, I think there was a lack of talking about nutrition.
Okay.
I think it is really important because 1 out of 3 children, 5-year-olds, are stunted, malnourished. Their brains aren't fully developed to how they're supposed to be, and that has many repercussions na lifelong. Kasi pagpapasok sila sa school, malnourished sila, kahit mag-improve na yung classrooms, kahit mag-improve na yung curriculum, but they're not able to learn, they'll remain stunted, and kawawa talaga yung mga bata. So I think also very important na bigyang tugon yung nutrition. It's a bit far off education, right? If you think about it, these are different things, but they are really intertwined. Early childhood care and development is very important, and in fact, nutrition shouldn't even start lang in kindergarten or in daycare. It should really start sa womb pa lang ng nanay, di ba? Na first 1,000 days. So I would guess that this problem or this challenge isn't just DepEds alone, but there is a need to work with other agencies, the DSWD, DOH, and hopefully it's not too late na maipasok siya sa agenda.
Right. Actually, I have to agree with you on that. Kasi di ba, tayong mga adults na kapag walang laman yung tiyan natin, nahihirapan tayong mag-function. So what more pa itong mga estudyante, of course, na pumapasok sa school na walang laman yung tiyan, di ba? So I hope the government will do something about it. For
Ako
your edge.
related yung sabihin ko kasi more of ako student needs in general, which includes nutrition. Kasi remember, nabanggit nga niya, di ba? You know that there are already cases of students who are really motivated to go to school kasi dun sila napapakain. Tapos minsan, hindi nila inuubos yung pagkain nila, inuuwi pa nila para mapakain din dun sa family nila. So it evolves not just on the student need, but the student's family needs as well. So they have to work with that. And also, yun nga, attached to the nutrition, you also have the health issues of the children. Like a child cannot learn, hindi lang yung laman ng tiyan eh. Pag masama ang pakiramdam ng isang bata, may iniindang sakit, o kulang sa tulog, kulang sa nagtrabaho sa field, paano siya makaka-concentrate? So, identifying the basic needs of the student. Of course, nutrition is one of these things. Pero yung kanilang student health, which it kind of extends to the family. Kasi yun yung maganda sa school eh. Also being a teacher, I recognize that the student is not an isolated entity, the learner. It's the school community. And you talk about the learner, that's extended to the need of the family. And how can that be addressed? Kasi meron ng school-based feeding program. So sana ma-support nga yung school-based feeding. And also the health and nutrition. Kasi minsan, may times that we are too focused on the curriculum, we are too focused on the classrooms, we forget that before the student, as she mentioned nga, goes to the classroom, there should be sufficient things that are given to address the basic needs of the learner. And especially, yun nga, we'll not forget, yung mga IP communities, the disadvantaged, those at high risk, di ba? Yung mga place in middle of the armed conflict, in the middle of yung mga disasters. Kasi remember, we want to support basically all the learners. And these areas, those whose needs are not addressed, the basic needs, they are the ones with the highest risk to drop out. And then kaya yun yung nagbabalon yung ating numbers eh. That's why I think before anything else, let's go with the basic. Lagi naman yun yung foundation. Diba sa bahay, ayan yung pundasyon mo ng bata. Ano yung pangangailangan niya para masiguradong yung pangangailangan niya. Yung parang maganda yung measure nga before na hindi mo kailangan mag-uniforme. Di ba? Parang, although merong ibang issues attached to that, pero yung mga bagay na magpapadeter sa'yo dahil wala akong ganitong supply, wala akong ganito, wala akong ganyan. It should be provided for. That's why education should continue to be, di ba, free, there should be availability of free, equitable, accessible, quality, hindi lang siya accessible, quality education. But for it to be that, you have to also provide the needs of the child.
Okay, thank you so much, Justin and Reg, for joining us. So let's keep the conversation going. How do you think the Philippines can solve its learning crisis? Join the discussion using #Rappler Talk. Again, I'm Bons Magsambol. Thanks for tuning in.